Hello, you're watching Desh ki Baat, and this is Shashi Tharoor, Member of Parliament for Thiruvananthapuram of the Indian National Congress Party. Sadly, our country has been going through a very turbulent phase with the nationwide protests against the discriminatory and frankly anti-national CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, and the announced intention to follow it with a nationwide NRC, or National Register of Citizens, linked to a national population register that the government wants to impose on the nation. But I'm not here to talk to you about that because I think our party's views on that subject are well known and well established. Instead, I'm going to talk to you today about one of the issues that has been obscured because of the nationwide focus on the protests, and that is the dismal state of our economy. Very sadly, the economy of India is in the worst shape that it has been for over a decade. We are looking at a period in which the government of the day has been unable to fulfill any of its promises. It spoke of increasing economic growth. It has instead presided over a collapse in economic growth, which in March 2011 had been at 8.5%, and now in March 2020 is estimated to be at 5%. This is, of course, also confirmed by World Bank predictions. We're looking at the worst GDP growth figures in 42 years since 1978. The government had, of course, a far too ambitious and unrealistic target for the fiscal year, but they're not going to match it. And that's been the story of this government since its election in 2014. Every year, you look at their projected growth, you look at their projected revenue estimates, you look at their planned fiscal deficit, and in every single year they've missed the target. This is a government whose economic ineptitude and embarrassing mismanagement of the nation's economy has now become a laughingstock. Now look at the way in which this has affected the investment climate abroad. The fiscal deficit target, every year they've missed it, but currently they're trying to say that they will somehow keep it to 3.3%. In fact, the estimates are of 3.8% of the fiscal deficit. The government is going to be spending more money than it can afford on things that the country doesn't need, whereas in fact real needs are not being met. The estimate is the government will cut spending on real needs for the nation to the tune of 2 lakh crores in a probably doomed effort to meet the fiscal deficit. On top of that, tax revenues are not keeping pace. Every year they project that they will get more revenues than they actually get. And what we are seeing is an estimated shortfall for fiscal year 2020 of 2.5 lakh crore rupees. So the government is at a loss as to how to manage the money that it needs even to do the things that are going to win it votes, like sending money to farmers every few months. And now what they've come up with is taking money out of the Reserve Bank of India, something which every Congress government had the fiscal prudence to resist the temptation to take money out of the RBI. This government took 1.76 trillion rupees, that is 1.7 lakh crore rupees, out of the RBI by asking for a dividend that no government in the past had taken from the RBI. And now, just a few months later, there are reports they will ask for another 45,000 crores from the Reserve Bank of India. In the midst of all this, it's rather surprising that this government has been unable to spend the money it actually has in its hands. That is, there are a number of cesses the government collects from all of us. The secondary and higher education cess, they've only used 20% of it. The clean energy cess, which is now abolished but which existed, they've only used 30% of the 55,000 crores they collected. Cess on BDs, 34%. Infrastructure cess, which actually is a colossal sum of money, only 7% has been utilized. Then there is a cess on crude oil that has collected 74,000 crores. They haven't touched it. Not one paise has been spent from the cess on crude oil. And the so-called research and development cess, so needed in a country where research and development is the crying need of the hour in the higher education field. they have not spent one paise of that either. So at a time when they're unable to actually improve the country's economy or meet their own promised targets, they can't even spend the money they actually have access to. Now, this is the same government that in the last election was spinning a dream of India becoming a $5 trillion economy. Now, Dr. Manmohan Singh, whose knowledge of economics, I would say, is considerably higher than that of our present Prime Minister, had already said that was impossible unless certain, at that point, unforeseeable conditions were met. The GDP were to grow at 8%, it would take another 8 to 9 years to get to 5 trillion. It would need to grow at 9% to get there in 7 years. How on earth will it get there in 5 years, and particularly with the woeful economic mismanagement of this government? Let's look at the key sectors. Everything is sadly going down. That is, that agriculture is in such distress that 31 farmers are committing suicide each day somewhere in India. That's the situation the government has been unable to address, let alone to redress. We're looking at mining going down, manufacturing down, construction down. If you look at every single sectors that actually are good at job creation, every one of them is in negative. Net investments are the lowest they have been in the last decade, and indeed lower obviously than the period of growth that we enjoyed under UPA. And per capita GDP is growing slower than it did under the UPA. In these circumstances, what can we point to? We have nothing to point to in terms of accomplishment. What we can point to is only failure. The unemployment rate of this country is at a 46-year high, which means that since 1974, we've never seen such high unemployment. Why is it that a government that came to power in 2014 boasting that it would create 10 million new jobs a year has not even been able to create 1 million new jobs in 5 years? Because it doesn't know how to go about it. It is a party, unfortunately, of empty promises and bombast without any track record of real delivery in its entire, now nearly 6 years in office. On top of that, we are looking at a situation in which the statistics of the government of India are no longer being trusted by economists around the world, where openly there are even the former chief economic advisor of the BJP government writing an article claiming that even these low GDP figures may be an overestimate and that the real GDP figures are actually probably lower. And on top of that, statisticians have resigned from the government service in the last 2 years because of attempts by this government to suppress or massage unfavorable numbers. Now, this is not a way in which you can deliver confidence in the Indian economy, either to investors inside India or to investors outside. I'm sorry to say, this government has let the nation down when it comes to managing the economy. Before we end this week's Desh Ki Baat, a brief word about another tragic situation facing the country, and that is the rampant increase in the crime rate. It's very sad to know that every year under BJP rule, the crimes reported in this country have gone up. 50.74 lakh in 2018 is the last figure we have on the record, which is an increase of nearly 2% from the previous year, which means an average of 80 murders, 289 kidnappings, and 91 rapes every single day being reported. And then there are crimes against women. 3,78,277 crimes in just 1 year against women, a 10.4% increase on the previous year. Now, why is this happening? I'm not suggesting that the government is committing these crimes, but I am suggesting that the government is not doing enough to prevent them. It could have been, for example, indispensable for a country like India to improve everything from street lighting in narrow, deserted or relatively underutilized areas to having more women police officers, having more police patrols, recruiting more police and taking them away from VIP duty into looking after the actual citizens of our country who need protection. The government has taken no such steps anywhere. In fact, it is in a BJP-ruled state, the state of Uttar Pradesh, that 163 assaults on women take place every day. And India as a whole suffers over 1,000 assaults on women every day. As far as rapes are concerned, again, it was the BJP-ruled state of Madhya Pradesh which had the highest record. Congress has now taken over that state, and we will improve the figures there without any doubt. There's also the phenomenon of kidnapping and abduction of women, which again, UP leads the way on, but over 200 such cases are reported every single day. On top of that, there is a particularly shameful thing about the crime rate in our country, is the number of atrocities against the weaker and more vulnerable sections of our society, particularly atrocities against the scheduled castes. If you look at the top 5 states reporting atrocities against scheduled castes, you have BJP-ruled Uttar Pradesh in number 1 position. Number 2 is Madhya Pradesh, also under BJP rule in 2018. Number 3, Rajasthan, also then under BJP rule. Number 4, Maharashtra, also then under BJP rule. Not surprising, all those states have got rid of their BJP governments. And number 5, BJP-JDU ruled Bihar. Now, these 5 states in 2018 accounted for 71% of the atrocities on scheduled castes in the whole of India. That's something that we really need to ask the BJP whether they have no accountability for it. And scheduled tribes are also in great distress under BJP rule, with the 3 BJP-ruled states in 2018 of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Maharashtra accounting for 53.5% of the total atrocities against scheduled tribes in India. We all know that the nation's capital is not safe. Every day we read grisly reports of violence, of killing, of robbery, of abduction, of murder, and indeed of assault against women. It is a sad day when the capital of the nation, instead of being a shining example of all that is wonderful about our country, that is worth showcasing about our country, turns out instead to be emblematic of the worst excesses that this government of the BJP has been unable to prevent. That was Desh Ki Baat for this week. I'm Shashi Tharoor. Thank you for listening. Jai Hind.